Good day, everyone. With you is Sheikh Ismail Muhammad Tajuddin El-Halfawi. Today we're going to be talking about the DTT, Discrete Trials Training. We're going to keep everything in layman's terms and hopefully everything very simplistic so that things are easy to follow. The DTT comprises of three major components. The first component is the SD, a presentation or a demand that's placed on the child. A lot of times it's in the form of a question. The second component is the child's response, how they respond to the SD. And the third component is the consequence that you deliver as a behavior tech or as an RBT. So you have the SD that's presented to the child. What's your name? Stand up, touch your head, and so forth and so on. Then the child's response, and then you deliver a consequence. Okay? Before the SD is delivered, you want to make sure that the child is attending. You want to make sure that the child's not looking down or biting at his hand or kind of looking around or can't hear you. You want to make sure the child is attending before you deliver the SD. So if you have the child's attention, you can run the trials back to back. If you don't have the child's attention, you want to wait a few seconds, gather the child's attention first, and then proceed with your trials. So we're going to do an example of 3 trials of a DTT program. Hey, what's your name? Michael, good job. Wow, yes. Your name is Michael. Great job answering about your name. Touch your nose. Wow, good job touching your nose. Excellent. Amazing. Do this. Wow. Nice job touching your head. Look. You've got 3 circles. Now you get to go on break. So, let's unpack that before we go into anything else. So before each trial, I waited a second. I made sure that the child was looking at me or the child was paying attention, and I gave some space before I gave a demand. So I didn't do all the demands back to back to back to back. I waited a little bit till I had his attention, and then I placed the demand. That's very important to have the child attending. What happens sometimes is that the therapist ends up repeating the same command over and over and over again. And this teaches the child something. This teaches the child that I don't have to listen or I don't have to comply until the 3rd time or the 4th time that I've been asked to do something, right? And so you see the situation in homes, right? You know, the mother says, Johnny, clean up your room. Then he kind of ignores him. And she's like, Johnny, clean up your room. Kind of doesn't do anything. And then maybe by the 4th or 5th time, yeah, he kind of cleans his room up. So that's not the situation you want to be in as a behavioral technician. You don't want to keep repeating the same SD over and over and over again. The only reason you would repeat an SD is if you truly estimated in your, if you truly estimated that the child did not hear the SD. So the child's mother walks into the room and is talking to him at the same time you give the SD. Or the child is halfway across the room and, for example, has a hearing aid, and so maybe the child did not hear you. Or something of that nature. the child is truly engaged in something else, or there's really a reason why the child would have not heard you. But if you're certain that the child heard you, don't repeat the SD. Don't get into the habit of repeating the SD over and over again. If you didn't get the response according to the protocols, for example, the protocols say the child will respond in 3 seconds. If not, do a prompt from least to most, for example. So repeat the SD, or say the SD one time. If you don't get a response, then proceed with the protocols of the program. Meaning prompt them, or do an error correction or what have you. But do not keep saying the same SD over again. To avoid having to do that, make sure the child is attending. Once the child is attending, then give the SD. If there's no response, or the response is not correct, then you're going to mark it as an incorrect response, or a no response is also going to be marked as an incorrect response. So I hope that makes sense for the SD. Another part regarding the SD is to pay attention to how the protocols are written by the BCBA. So in one of the trials, I said, do this, and I simply did an action. I didn't state what the action was. So if that's what the protocol says, do this, then that's all you do. You simply make an action. See if you can imitate it, right? Don't say, do this, touch your nose, or Johnny, touch your nose. Imitation is just imitation. So if it's a do this command, simply say do this and demonstrate. Now, if the child does exhibit the behavior that you want, and you give him a token or you mark him correct or something like that, after he's demonstrated the behavior, you can say, good job touching your nose, because we want to be specific in praise. Okay? So you can say, Johnny, do this. Wow, great job touching your nose. So when you're giving him the praise, then you can specifically say what he did. But you don't want to say, Johnny, touch your nose, right? So if the program is do this, or the program is imitation, you want to stick strictly with imitation, okay? Likewise, if the program is touch your head, then you don't want to demonstrate, because this is receptive language. So you simply want him to listen to you give that instruction, touch your head, and he should then touch his head, right? So one is imitation, one is receptive language. Can you follow a one-step direction? Don't mix them up. Just as it's written in the protocols, that's what you should be doing, nothing more. So if it's an imitation, it's only imitation. If it's a directive, it's only a directive without you demonstrating or modeling the behavior. Okay? So this is as it relates to the SD. As it relates to the response, look carefully at what the criteria is to be accepted for a correct response. Okay? So if the correct response is, for example, you're doing quiet hands, and the protocol for quiet hands means that one arm is placed above the other arm, right? If this is the expectation of quiet hands in the protocols, one forearm to be placed over the other forearm in a folding position. If the child does this, or the child does this, or the child does this, or the child simply removes his hands, we can't count that as a correct response. So be very particular about what the criteria for the correct response is when you are marking the data, when you're collecting the data. Next thing is the consequence. So there's two consequences that we're going to talk about. One consequence is the consequence for the end of the program. So typically when you're running DTT, me specifically, I love to run 5 trials in a row or 10 trials in a row. So there's no rule that says you have to do that, but it's easy for me to do the math. It's easy for me to calculate. So I'm in the habit, if possible, running 10 trials in a row, 5 trials in a row. If I have a child that has behavior problems and I can barely get them to sit for 2 or 3 trials, then I might run 1 trial and then try to build them up to 2 to 3. But ultimately, I want to run 5 in a row, 10 in a row. So there's 2 reinforcers that are going to take place. One reinforcer is directly after the child admits the correct response. So you're going to give verbal praise and you may give them a token. So you ask the question, Johnny, what day is it today? Excellent, today is Monday. So I've gave him the verbal praise, that's the reinforcement, and I've given him a circle or a token or what have you. That's another form of reinforcement, okay? So when he finishes the program or he finishes the set, there's another reinforcer that he's going to get for finishing the set of 10 or finishing the set of 3 or finishing the set of 5. That other reinforcer is a break or access to the iPad or access to a toy or access to an edible or what have you, okay? So to review, you're going to give him the SD, he's going to respond, you're going to give him a consequence. The consequence is either going to be error correction or you're going to prompt him to the correct response. If it is correct, you're going to give him verbal praise and then perhaps a token or something immediate, and then you're going to proceed to the next trial. After your set is finished of 5 trials or 10 trials, then he's going to have a larger reinforcer, which is going to be a, whatever you guys have arranged or whatever you found to be reinforcing for him. Okay. One of the purposes of the token board, and I didn't have a token board, so I made a makeshift token board. Ideally, you don't want to have to keep drawing circles through the whole session, so you can use actual tokens that you can put on and then rip back off and things like that. But the idea for the token board is that the child should be able to pace themselves. The child should understand the routine. The child should know how close they are to getting the reinforcer. That's very important, and that's something that's going to help you control behavior. So there's mainly 3 things that you can use, or actually 4 things. One is a kind of first then or now and then. So it's kind of like a board that has now we do this and then you get this. So we put this sticker on now, which is our task for now, and then after we finish that, we can get the next thing, which is your reinforcer. So that's the first thing, now and then chart. The second thing is a token board. So it can be 3 tokens, 5 tokens, 10 tokens. I always like to use 5 or 10 because it's easy for the math. And that helps them understand how close they are to being done and how close they are to being reinforced. Another thing is a timer. Some people, they have timers, they use their phone, and they just kind of keep their phone with them, and they're looking on the phone to see, okay, I want this guy to work for 5 minutes or for 10 minutes. But the child doesn't see the phone. Whatever you're using, the child has to be able to see that, has to be able to monitor themselves and see how close they are to being to reinforcement. So if you're using a timer, it needs to be where the child can see the timer and understand it. If it's a larger timer that kind of makes a noise, ding, 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 or something like that, where the child understands it has a bell to it, and the child can see the time go down, this is more preferable. So it has to be some way that the child can monitor themselves. If you're using the timer on your phone, for example, have the time go down instead of going up because it's easier to understand. So instead of going from 1 minute and then 2 minutes and then 3 minutes, then finally we get to 5 minutes and it goes off, have it go in the opposite. So there's only 3 minutes left, then there's only 2 minutes left, then there's only 1 minute left, then there's only 30 seconds left, then the timer goes off, we're done. Okay? But the important thing is you need something where the child can monitor themselves and know how close they are to the reinforcement. Even if it's just you if it's just you telling the child. For example, saying, hey, we've got to get 3 of these done. Wow, you got the first one. We've got 2 more. Great job. Wow, we've got 2 down. We've got 1 more. Just 1 more to go and we can have that break. So even if it's just you verbally telling them, then this is what has to happen. So the now then token board, a timer, or you verbally letting them know how much time is left is what's needed to help the child manage their behavior. From all of these, probably the token board is best. It's the easiest thing to understand, but it depends on the cognitive level of your child. So, some children, if you're saying, yeah, we've got 4 down and we got 1 more to go, it's too much information. It's too complicated. It's too much wordage. So they're not, they might be 2 years old, or they might have some intellectual impairment. So they're not understanding, okay, there's 3 down and 2 to go. What does that mean? So if this is complicated, then maybe they need something that's visual. So you've got an hourglass with sand in it. And they understand, okay, when the sand runs out, I get to go play. That's all I need to know. It finishes, play. So that may be helpful for some. So whatever measure you're using has to be appropriate to the intellectual level of the child. But they have to be able to monitor themselves, especially if they have difficulty controlling their behavior. So just imagine, for example, you're in a lecture and you're sitting in college and this lecture is, this guy's going on and on and on, hopefully not like this lecture that I'm giving now. And he's going on and on for hours. So if you know when he's going to be done, someone's like, yeah, just hang in there, 2 minutes left and we'll be finished. You're more likely to exhibit behavior that is conducive to a student listening to a lecture for the next 10 minutes. But if you have no idea when he's going to be done, you might just be like, listen, I can't deal with this. I gotta leave. I gotta get up. It's just too much. It's too much. I can't stand it. Because you don't know when the end is coming. And then it adds frustration. So the same thing with a child. When you're asking them to do things, and it's difficult for them to do, they might just get to the point where, just throw the things out the way and just take off and start running. This is just too much. I can't do it. But if they understand clearly, do this 3 times, here's the iPad. Do this 3 times, here's the banana that you wanted to eat, or the apple, or one of your favorite snacks, or your favorite toy, or what have you. So that helps them to kind of understand what's going on, to establish a system, and to control their own behavior. So you have to, and then it also makes your reinforcer more powerful. Because if it's unknown when the reinforcer will be delivered, that lessens the value of the reinforcer. So imagine if I tell you, for example, hey, if you work well today, I'm going to give you a car. If you work well, I'm going to give you a car. You say, oh, wow, I really work well. Yeah, but I didn't tell you when I'm going to give it to you. So it could be after 10 years. It could be after 20 years. It could be tomorrow. It could be, I don't know when I'm going to give it to you, but you'll get it. So, if I don't know when I'm going to get it, he promised me this. Maybe a car is a little bit over the top, but he promised me $20. Yeah, if I don't know when I'm going to get the $20, if it might come in 20 years from now or 10 years from now, that doesn't really mean too much for me. If he's going to give it to me in 5 months, I don't know when I'm going to get it. But if you understand exactly when the reinforcer is coming, it's going to be more valuable to you and more of a motivating factor in terms of your behavior. So same thing with the child. Always let them be able to understand when they're going to get their reinforcement, and let them judge it for themselves. Don't keep the token board just for you that you're writing down. Don't keep the phone just for you, only you can see it. Have it something appropriate for them to be able to independently monitor how far I am to getting the reinforcement. Okay, that's very important.